welcome in everyone to this conversation with Phillips Theological Seminary. My name is Vanessa Carter. I am the Director of Marketing Communications, and today we have the honor of speaking with Dr. Alaina Roberts. She is one of the co-hosts of the Freedmen Community Conversation, event that we're having Saturday, February. I think that's the 28th,
The
right?
last day of the month, yeah.
The last day of the month. So this is the big banger of this event that we've been having with Black Church Traditions. So it is highly anticipated, and yeah, I'm ready to kind of talk through it and let people know, what this event is about and what they could, expect from it.
Well, I have been very fortunate to have kind of a several years long partnership with Phillips. I have had virtual events. I haven't gotten a chance to go yet, so I'm excited for that. But this is a continuation of looking at the research of scholars, including myself, who study Black people who were enslaved by Native Americans in, what is today Oklahoma. So this event is building on kind of historical research, but looking to get into kind of the practical reality of people who are descendants of those Black slaves, people who are called today freedmen, who live in Oklahoma today, but don't have their histories with Native American nations recognized.
Oh wow. And you said this is part two of what happened. I guess was that last year or the year before?
Uh, 2 years ago?
Maybe two? Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
lost this.
Yeah. Why was it important for you guys to, have this event, again, for the community?
Well, Dr. Carter has been really great about centering the community in the space that they are in. Meaning, like, feeling that it's important for people in Tulsa to know the history of Tulsa, to help educate Oklahomans about Oklahoma history. And a really big and important part of Oklahoma history is Native American history, and I think that's pretty well known. But the Black part of Native American history in Oklahoma is not as well known. So, for those of you who are not familiar with that history, there were five Native American nations that owned Black slaves, originally in the Southeast, places like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. And when those Native nations were forced to move from the Southeast to the West, they moved to what was then called Indian Territory and what is now the state of Oklahoma. So when they brought those Black people with them, those Black slaves, they were really kind of creating a culture of both Black and Native, language, food, music, etc., that was the foundation for the state of Oklahoma.
The goal for this event, from what I'm hearing you say, is to educate people on the Native and Black, history that has existed, here in Oklahoma. And Dr. Carter, who's the program director over Black Church Traditions and African American Heritage, emphasized this being a conversation. So what should people come with, with that context of it being a conversation, just so that this is something that can be helpful and, like you said, something that's practical, where maybe certain things can, kind of take place afterward, and it's not just, you guys just talking.
So I'll use myself as an example. So I started off as someone who knew nothing about this history growing up. In college, I began doing research on what existed out there, the few books and articles that were written on this history. I connected with a number of genealogists, like people like Angela Walton Raji, who may be at this event, people like Terry Ligon, who helped me understand that this history has been relatively undertold. And so, first, I understood it as kind of a scholarly exercise, a way to understand this history and tell this history to people who study history broadly.
Hmm.
But now I see that it is very much a fight, an ongoing fight for people who live in Oklahoma. So yes, I don't live in Oklahoma, which means that I I'm not living on a reservation. I don't have, roads that I'm driving on that are paid for by Native American nations. I'm not near casinos that are run by Native American nations. But for those of my family who are, and other freedmen who live in Oklahoma, their whole environment is kind of shaped by these Native American nations, and it really wears on people, I think, to have museums and cultural centers and TV shows and things that talk about Oklahoma history without including them. And so this event is number one about trying to spread education about this history and also try to push tribal nations to acknowledge it in the spaces that they have, like their libraries, their casinos, their museums, but also to fight for citizenship. So, just as African Americans in the United States are citizens of the US, the nation in which their ancestors were enslaved, because their ancestors fought for that and felt they deserved it because of the labor that made this society, I feel, and most scholars feel, that it's right that freedmen should be citizens of the tribal nations in which their ancestors labored. And so there is one nation in Oklahoma right now, the Cherokee Nation, that fully recognizes Black freedmen, that gives them all the same rights and privileges of citizenship as their non-Black Cherokee citizens have. But the Muskogees do not, the Seminoles do not, the Choctaws do not, and the Chickasaws do not. And so, as a person with a family background in the Chickasaw and Choctaw nations, I'm trying to kind of pick up the baton of our ancestors from the 1800s and say, let's reopen this conversation, because the Cherokees have been so much in the news, and now the Muskogees and the Seminoles to a smaller extent, that the Choctaws and the Chickasaws have kind of gotten to get away from that attention. And so the on the ground momentum that we need is people who are going to be interested in, knocking on doors, like using pamphlets that they give out at events, holding talks like the one that we're doing at the end of February to educate their neighbors or their friends, their relatives, and also talk to them about what it would mean to really kind of accept this history and talk about it and allow Black people who have been a part of their nation and who live around them to be citizens alongside them.
Wow, yeah, this is interesting. So I'm in a probably not unique at all position to where this is, new information for myself. And so there's some curiosity that I do have around this topic. So and I'm sure there are people who might be viewing this as well who, you know, are wondering. Friedman is the this group of African Americans who are a part of a tribal group and haven't been able to reach or to get the same recognition for their native group. Is that what I'm understanding, or is that off?
Yes, so freedman is a legal term, and freedman has been used to refer to African Americans in the United States after they're emancipated, but also to refer to Black people who were enslaved in Native American nations. And
Mm.
so when I write about Black people who are slaves of a Chickasaw Native person or a Choctaw, I call them a Chickasaw freedman or a Choctaw freedman, to denote that they're not living in the United States. And so technically they're not an African American. Like they're living in these nations. They're, they have to follow their rules, their laws. They're being punished by, Native people. They're hearing Native languages around them. So they're part of those Native societies.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. One thing that you noted, which I mean is often commonly said about, especially with Black history overall, is that there are there are things that have been untold about this history. And of course, I mean, there's so many historical implications. It's really hard to get into all of it. But in Oklahoma, like based on your research, what does research show as to why this has been untold outside of like the kind of like normal untold stories of our history, like things being burned, history being burned, things of that nature? Like, has there been anything else that has come up to understand why part of this history has not been told?
Like if we look at the more well-known narrative of African American history in the United States, we're aware that obviously Black people have been here, have contributed to what became the United States since they were British colonies. We know that people weren't always literate, so they couldn't leave behind documentation, as you're kind of alluding to. But we also know that there was a fight for civil rights, but also for that story to be told. That's why we have, today the National Museum of African American History and Culture. That was a decades-long fight to get our story told in the kind of center of the United States. There are also museums across the United States dedicated to telling African American history. The same is not true for Native American nations and Black people within those nations. First of all, we're a smaller group, so we don't have kind of the numbers all across the United States to come together to fight for that representation. We also have the fact that a lot of freedmen descendants don't know they're freedmen. Because their families moved out of Oklahoma, like my family moved to California. I didn't know that story because it wasn't carried on through that migration. So there are a lot of people who just think of themselves as African American, not realizing that they also have this history of enslavement with the Native American nations. Lastly, there's the fact that tribal nations themselves don't want to tell this history. Um, Native Americans, historically faced lots of oppression. They face genocide today. They still face oppression from their own state government. Um, and so it's, I think, easy for a lot of Native people to say, we are still suffering. Like, why should we tell this story that makes us look like bad guys? And I kind of get that because it's complicated because then you have to understand, why did Native Americans have slaves? Because it helped them in a way. It helped them to survive financially. It helped them be accepted by white Americans to a greater extent than other Native Americans who did not become capitalists and become property owners. And so you have to tell a larger story to be able to help people understand that. And so instead, they just kind of take the easy way out and don't tell it at all.
Wow. And I think that the kind of bad guy image, I feel like that plagues a lot of our stories from being, told. And I think that this conversation, I mean, again, like, my perspective is that this is all new information for me. And so, it's troubling. It's troubling to hear.
When I teach my classes, I'm a history professor in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and most of my students are white. And when they're taking my classes on African American or Native American history, I tell them this is not about trying to make you feel bad. Like, this is not about saying you are personally responsible for slavery. You weren't there. Your ancestor may not have even owned slaves. But what you are responsible for is knowing this history today and doing what you can to learn it and understand it and make sure that it's not repeated in your own daily actions. And so what I'm trying to do with this event and with the other work that I'm doing in other places is getting tribal citizens involved with freedmen. So saying this is not just a fight for freedmen, this is a fight for tribal citizens as well, because this is their history. And
Mm-hmm.
it's up to them to say, politician who represents me, I want you to talk about this. I want you to, again, be held accountable for this history. I'm really excited that Carla Pratt, who is a professor of law at OU, is going to be there because she has a wealth of knowledge of, the things that I don't understand with regard to tribal law and jurisdiction and possibly helping us as freedmen and tribal citizens to find an avenue through which we can gain kind of an audience with the tribal politicians who have so far kind of been able to ignore this issue.
Mm, okay. Oh wow. So Carla's input's going to be really, really nice. And then, you know what? That reminds me of like so what do we do next? Conversation. I think a lot of times with topics like this, it's like, okay, but what can we actually do in our community next? And to have someone
Yes.
with a legal perspective, that's going to be really helpful, for people so that they know what their rights are and not only holding these tribal communities together, but I mean, accountable, but also policy and local government.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay. Well, Elena, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for speaking with us. We're excited to see both you and Carla. We hope that you guys will be able to to take a lot from it from the audience and have a good time here in Tulsa as well. So we appreciate you. We appreciate your time.